Hello and welcome to Politics Today. And in this programme today, we'll be talking about the ongoing row and crisis within the Labour Party and surrounding Jeremy Corbyn, those of his anti-Semitic views, and also as we approach the party conference season, we'll be asking, is this the time to depose Jeremy Corbyn? And discuss this issue, I'm joined by Robin Benson and also Michael McCann, the director and founder of Israel Britain Alliance. So gentlemen, welcome to the programme. Robin, I'll start off with you because throughout the summer there hasn't been a day gone by, I don't think, where the issue of Jeremy Corbyn and some of his revolting anti-Semitic views or pure Jew hatred, as it were, has been reported in the media, with Labour Jewish MPs feeling extremely uncomfortable and concerned. What was your sense of what's happening and why is this dragging on and nothing being done about it?
Well, I think, as I said to you in a text message either last night or the day before, just in researching before coming on the programme, there was just a mixture of a feeling of anger, but just being fed up at all of this stuff that's gradually unfolding in relation to Jeremy Corbyn. And I think part of the problem is that he never probably anticipated being Labour leader. A lot of this stuff predates the leadership election that's been revealed, although there's been some awful stuff since then. And I think he's facing a situation where people are now trawling videos, articles, you name it, where Jeremy Corbyn appeared to see if there's something else to expose. And what he has said and done over the last 3 or 4 years, to use the expression, has come right round behind him to bite him on the backside. And so he faces this onslaught of criticism, and all of it justified, but nevertheless, criticism for the things he said and done.
Yeah. Michael, has Jeremy Corbyn now allowed anti-Semitism, or label it Jew hatred as it were, to actually become mainstream and acceptable? Because it seems that more and more revelations are coming out regarding his hatred of Israel, his disregard for the Jewish people, and even essentially calling the fact that British Zionists, Jews, are not even considered British.
Yeah, it's all of that, and it's all of that from his supporters. But I think in terms of Robin's initial analysis, he's 100% correct. He didn't expect to be the Labour leader. There was a perfect storm of the changes that Ed Miliband made to the rule book, which allowed people to join for £3, and nobody or few people recognised the dangers after the 2015 general election, when there was a massive influx of hard left support into the Labour Party, and then the stupidity of a number of MPs who should have known better of signing the papers which allowed Jeremy Corbyn to be on the ballot paper. As soon as that happened, he'd won. As soon as he'd been put in the ballot paper, he'd won, because there was tens of thousands of people who joined the party who believed in the same nonsense as he does. But it's even worse than the perspective that Robin's just given us about the press is now uncovering things that he said, pictures of holding wreaths outside or beside the graves of terrorists who killed people, innocent people. It's worse than that. He believes all of it. He believes every single thing that he's ever done. So this was never about a kinder, gentler politics. This was introducing into the United Kingdom a mainstream party leader who believes in the causes of organisations like Hamas, who want to drive the Jewish people into the sea, who believes in the cause of Hezbollah, who have the same objective. And therefore, there was nothing kinder or gentler about it. It was about taking the Labour Party to an extreme where it has never, ever, ever been before. It's heartbreaking to watch, absolutely heartbreaking, but that's where we are in 2018.
Can I ask a question of you, Michael? Then how do you reconcile his statement saying that he's, against anti-Semitism, the blurb that comes out from those surrounding him that he's against anti-Semitism? How can we reconcile that with what he's been up to? Because it's on one hand he's saying one thing, but on the other hand, all of this data that's coming out says something completely different. And I find it a struggle to bring the two things together.
Yeah, well, it's no different to a child being caught with his face covered in chocolate and then claiming that he never ate the bar of chocolate. It's as simple as that, because Jeremy Corbyn says and what he does are two different things. Claiming that you've not got a racist bone in your body, but then standing beside people and calling them friends and supporters who in turn wish to see a whole nation being wiped off the face of the earth, means that what you've said is untrue and that you're a liar. And that's the sort of language that has to be used. And Jeremy Corbyn has now developed a way of dealing with these issues. Every time he's called out on something, first of all, he denies it. Then he offers some sort of explanation about, and people have been making fun of him, I mean, mocking him, saying, oh, I accidentally slipped on the floor and a wreath ended up in my hand and I turned out I was at the wrong grave. So, you know, people are now mocking the man. My biggest concern is that for the people in the Labour Party who have joined, who got him elected and have subsequently joined, they don't care. Because they still hold up to all the tropes that have been put around about the Jewish people controlling the media, the Jewish people controlling the world's finances, all the things which are complete rubbish and are racist. They believe that. What I am really, really worried about is if this was a leader of a party saying saying this about black people, then he wouldn't be there. He just wouldn't be in the job. But despite the fact that one revelation after another, if you'll give the pun, has been uncovered, and each and every day, he's still there. And he's still going to be there, and quite frankly, he's still going to be there in the future until he decides to go. Or when his minders decide when he can go.
Absolutely. And, I mean, for example, we've had a big news story this week that the former chief rabbi, Lord Jonathan Sacks, has come out and said that Jeremy Corbyn is the most offensive politician since Enoch Powell and his famous Rivers of Blood speech. That's a pretty damning indictment. Also, the fact that the Jewish community are extremely alarmed and concerned about Jeremy Corbyn, because if he becomes Prime Minister, the issue of anti-Semitism becomes a national issue. And it's something that he can't guarantee that he's going to protect the Jewish people.
Well, I think it really is a national issue. And the media that have been on digging all of this stuff up have made it a national issue, and quite rightly so. But the fact that Lord Sacks, you know, has written the article that he has and the coverage that it has only reinforces the view, you know, of the Jewish people that this man, Jeremy Corbyn, is, you know, a danger to the Jewish community in particular. But as Michael has said, there are lots of other policies that he and his buddies want to implement that are a danger to the whole country. But, you know, we're concentrating on the Jewish people, and the fact that Lord Sacks has, you know, written what he's written is a warning sign to the rest of us how the Jewish community feels. Because this man, you know, for the 20 or so years that he was the chief rabbi, was held in respect across communities of all faiths. So for him to feel the need to write what he's written, I mean, and it is in very clear, strong terms. It cannot be argued that he's saying something other than he's saying. It is a desperate call for people to, you know, to rally around and to challenge this man.
Absolutely. Let's have a look now at this excellent video on Jeremy Corbyn, produced by Dory Gold from the Jerusalem Centre for Public Affairs.
Anti-Semitism is back, though it can be argued that it never went away. The real focus of our attention should be in the United Kingdom, with the rise of Jeremy Corbyn as the leader of the British Labour Party, and in effect, the head of the opposition. If you're not following how this story is unfolding, the details are extremely important. Look at what British leaders themselves are saying. This month, the deputy head of the British Labour Party, Tom Watson, in fact declared that the British Labour Party is in danger of disappearing into a vortex of eternal shame over the issue of anti-Semitism. So this is not just an observation made by parts of the Jewish community. It's an observation, in fact, made by the most central parts of Britain's political establishment. And the British press is not at all reluctant to report. And in the Jewish community, the three main Jewish newspapers in the UK published a joint editorial that should Jeremy Corbyn form the next government, that would pose an existential threat to British Jewry. Much of the concern about Corbyn emanates from fresh revelations of Mr. Corbyn himself and his past activities. In 2009, for example, he called Hamas and Hezbollah friends.
An event in Parliament where our friends from Hezbollah will be speaking. I'd also invited friends from Hamas to come and speak as well.
Hamas was using suicide bombers to blow up buses in the heart of Israel's cities, in Haifa, Tel Aviv, and of course in Jerusalem. Yet Corbyn advocated removing these organizations, Hamas and Hezbollah, from the UK's terrorism list.
And I would invite the government to reconsider its position on this matter and start talking directly to Hamas and Hezbollah.
In 2014, Corbyn visited the cemetery in Tunisia, where the leaders of Black September were buried. Remember, they were responsible for the attack on the Israeli Olympic team at the 1972 Munich Olympics, where 11 Israeli athletes were brutally butchered. Corbyn continuously campaigned to free Samar Alami and Jawad Botmeh, jailed for their role in the 1994 London bombing attacks against the Israeli embassy in Great Britain and Jewish charity buildings. Recall, both of these attacks were perpetrated on British soil, and both individuals were prosecuted and found guilty in British courts. So why is Jeremy Corbyn calling this a mistrial and trying to get these two terrorists out of British prison? Corbyn is also at the heart of the debate in Britain over the definition of anti-Semitism. He's refused to accept the definition advanced by the International Holocaust Remembrance Alliance, the IHRA, which is, by the way, accepted by 31 countries, 24 of which are members of the European Union. Corbyn and the British Labour Party reject 4 out of 11 examples the definition uses. He denies that accusing Jews automatically of dual loyalty is anti-Semitic. He denies that questioning the rights of the Jewish people to self-determination is a form of anti-Semitism. Finally, he rejects that it is anti-Semitic to compare Israeli policy to that of the Nazis. These caveats that he and his party are advancing allow him to dilute the meaning of anti-Semitism. This kind of demonization of the Jewish people is classic anti-Semitism. If these doctrines about Israel and Jewish rights become legitimized in Great Britain, which was the fountainhead of so many democracies and states in the world, then there is a real danger that they become legitimized worldwide. And this is something that the state of Israel must firmly oppose, and that Britain must not allow to happen.
Yeah. And all of us can't allow this to happen on our watch. That was a very excellent video there produced by Dori Gold, Israel's former ambassador to the UN. And it really shows that Israel now is becoming extremely concerned about Jeremy Corbyn. This is no longer just a British Jewish issue. It's now become a global Jewish issue. And anyone who believes in democracy and freedom of speech and liberty have to be appalled at some of the horrendous comments and the fact that he calls members of Hamas and Hezbollah his friends, describes those belonging to Black September responsible for the Munich massacre at the Munich Olympics in '72 as his brothers. This is beyond the pale. So why are we not seeing so many Labour MPs resign en masse with this position?
Well, the reason you probably don't see them resigning en masse is because they're not collectively getting their act together. You know, everyone thinks that politicians would be very switched on to the fact that they should be working together and coordinating, and how do we defeat Jeremy Corbyn. They already tried. First, the biggest mistake that was made was by MPs like Margaret Beckett, Sadiq Khan, Gareth Thomas and others who nominated Jeremy Corbyn. They gave him the platform of being on the ballot paper, which in turn led him to be elected. And then they tried the old trick, which was to start the resignations and then to get another ballot so that they could kick out Corbyn. It didn't work because he was back on the ballot paper. I mean, whoever the clever clogs was that thought up that idea should have made sure that he wasn't going to get in the ballot paper again. But of course, if you remember back to that time, the National Executive Committee was taking at least legal advice and so on and so forth. All that detail was there. They were never going to get rid of Jeremy Corbyn if he get back on the ballot paper. So they're all been sitting in their little silos wondering how to deal with it. And when they really should have been talking. Now, my understanding is, I don't know exactly what's going on behind the scenes. My understanding is that there are people who have said enough is enough. But I've heard that before, and ultimately people will have to make that brave move, because what will then happen is that the Corbynites' momentum will turn on them. They will make their lives a misery in social media, and there will be genuinely in fear, just in the same way as that Jewish Labour MPs are in fear of a Corbynite Labour Party, that these people will be fear, because it gets aggressive, it gets violent, and I'm talking about physically violent. I'm not just talking about words here, physically violent. So they'll be worried about that, and so that all goes on. But ultimately, the people like Tom Watson in that video, I have to tell you that I find that so two-faced to be unbelievable, because Tom Watson did a deal with the Corbynites ahead of the 2017 general elections that said, right, you can have that seat if we'll have this seat. So a moderate was put in place, but then a Corbynite was put in place elsewhere. That means that there is now in the Parliamentary Labour Party, there is a core support for Corbyn, which means the next time there's any nomination process, he'll automatically fly by the numbers required to get on the ballot paper, or indeed the successor to Corbyn will fly by the nominations needed to get on the ballot paper. The Labour Party's lost. It's finished. That's why my former colleague Tom Harris is now a Daily Telegraph writer. Tom resigned from the party recently, saying that the war is over and the Corbynites' momentum have won. It's a horrible situation. We've got the situation where a man who hates our country, Jeremy Corbyn, wants to be the Prime Minister of our country, a man that refused to stand or sing the national anthem, who stands at a wreath-laying ceremony for a terrorist, praying with his Muslim friends. So he claims that he was putting on an act, but he won't put on an act to sing or stand for the national anthem. It disgusts me that he's a leader of a party. It disgusts me he has the potential to be the Prime Minister of a country. But what disgusts me even more is that there is not such an outpouring of anger from the general public that we're even still talking about it, because he should be gone.
Yeah. And I want to bring you into this one, Robin, because, as kind of Christians, how do we respond to this? Because when it comes to the issue of Jew hatred, we know from our scriptures, we know from history, that once we see Jew hatred emerge in society, it means that there is danger and evil ahead. And Jew hatred doesn't just affect the Jewish community, it affects everyone. So what, as Christians, can we do in response to this vile man in Jeremy Corbyn?
Well, I think, first of all, coming back to the comments you just made, as I said to you before we started the programme, I think it's time to stop using the term anti-Semitism. It has become so bandied around and so clinical. We need to start calling it for what it actually is, and that's Jew hatred, and it's Israel hatred, and the two things are related. The other thing I wanted to just inject into the conversation is that, the Apostle Peter, in his first letter, talks about a time in the end days where people believe a lie so much that it actually takes hold of them. They are so deluded that the delusion takes hold. And from a spiritual or a biblical perspective, that's the only way I can explain what Jeremy Corbyn is doing, where he says one thing and does something completely opposite, that the man is spiritually, if you want to use the term, it sounds extreme, but demonically deluded. As Christians, what do? Well, we can't bury our head in the sand. So we need to realise, as Michael and people like him are doing, we have to stand up and be counted. We have to be prepared to stand with the Jewish community, and there are many Christians who are prepared to do that, but it's not enough. We really have got to get on board with this, because as you pointed out, in every society where the Jewish people have been persecuted, on whatever level that is, it never stops with them. It spreads out into the rest of society as well. We have to, get involved in campaigns. Some of us don't like politics, I'm aware of that. But this is not about politics. This is about a part of our population who feel, rightly so, under severe threat. And they have to be assured that in this nation, they do not stand alone.
Absolutely. And what about Labour MPs like Margaret Hodge, who feels that she's been personally attacked and singled out because she's actually Jewish within the Parliamentary Labour Party? How can we support her and other Jewish Labour MPs who are feeling pretty much under the cosh, as it were, within the Labour Party under Jeremy Corbyn's leadership?
It's extremely difficult, because these very people, they're giving you a conundrum, and here's a conundrum. Margaret Hodge, let's use Margaret as an example. Margaret Hodge believes that Jeremy Corbyn is an anti-Semite, okay? They tried to sanction her for saying that, and they had to pull back once she got Michaud and Derea, I think was the law firm, to write to the National Executive of the Labour Party to say where they blundered so many times. One thing that we know that the hard left aren't very good at is bureaucracy. They always make these errors. But now that Margaret Hodge has overcome that issue, although the Damocles sword still hangs over Ian Austin's head, if I'm correct, that Margaret Hodge says is going to stand as a Labour candidate whenever the next general election is, and says, vote for me, and by voting for Margaret Hodge, you'll in turn elect Jeremy Corbyn as the Prime Minister of the country. The very person that she describes as a racist. Mm-hmm. It doesn't compute for me, and it wouldn't compute for me if I was still there. I'm long left now. I mean, I'm history in terms of that part of my life. But the point is, the dilemma that I would have is, how could I stand as a Labour candidate with the Labour rose beside my name when the leader of a party was a racist? That's the fundamental problem that I would have. I know what conclusion that I would reach on that point, and it is disingenuous for people to say, vote for me and I'll fight Jeremy Corbyn from within, because that's made no difference whatsoever on these issues. Yeah. And incidentally, forget about racism, anti-Semitism is the biggest issue at the moment. But by the way, that's us without talking about his economic policies, his policies in terms of immigration and all these other issues, which are equally bonkers, and quite frankly would send us into an even deeper recession than the 2008 crash. If people genuinely are thinking they'll vote for Labour because he's going to shake things up, you ain't seen nothing yet if you thought it was tough and you were in wage freezes and people lost their jobs, because the money would immediately leave the country. There would be no investment, and that in turn would mean we wouldn't have enough money to pay for our schools, our National Health Service, and all the things that a lot of people hold so dear to their hearts. So it's a real mess. But in terms of the Labour Party, going back to the original point in your question, my view would be, if I was one of those individuals who was, my conscience was being tortured at the moment, I would get together with other people who were also in that same place as me, and I'd work out a strategy and we do it collectively. At least that way, you've got the protection of that group to see you through the inevitable pain which would be suffered after making an announcement that you weren't prepared to work with this man anymore.
Yeah, and Robin, our politics has gone absolutely crazy over the last few years. Now we're approaching the party conference season, and in any normal political circumstance, issue of Jew hatred plaguing the leader Jeremy Corbyn would mean that this is a complete distraction from the party, its policy objectives, its ability to communicate to voters on core policy issues that it wants to put out. Now, doesn't this distract from Labour's main aims and objectives for their forthcoming policy discussions to convince the electorate that they need to vote for Labour, and that Labour represent an alternative to the current Conservative government. So therefore, isn't it imperative that MPs actually act and stand against him during the party conference?
Well, I mean, I agree with you. I agree with the point that you've made, but as Michael has already pointed out, unless there is a sizable group of parliamentary Labour MPs plus constituency representatives who are able to get together to oppose this man and the cadre that he's got around him, to be honest with you, I despair as to what will, if anything, happen at the Labour Party conference. And without want to go sidetrack, you've got the Conservatives that are totally consumed with their leadership structure and Brexit. So neither party actually is addressing some of the major issues that the country is facing. And you begin to think, what on earth has gotten into these people?
Yeah. And Michael, what can our viewers do in response to this? Many of our viewers, love the Jewish people. They stand with the Jewish people. And to see a leader like Jeremy Corbyn that says not only are terrorists his friends, but also his brothers, surely sends out some very, very dangerous warning signals to not only our viewers, but also to the rest of the country.
Well, there's only one thing you can do. And that's, one thing you can't do, which is that sit back and do absolutely nothing. Now, I understand that party politics, and I've been involved in it most of my adult life, in fact all of my adult life, that it can turn some people off. But I genuinely believe that a lot of the things that I did when I was involved in politics, and incidentally, more when I was a councillor than a member of parliament, I actually made a difference, because the politics is all local. It's about the hole in front and the road in front of you. So my view is that, you can't just dismiss the system. You have to recognise, as Winston Churchill did, that democracy is the worst form of government ever, except for all the other ones that have been tried from time to time. So therefore, my view is that people have to get involved. And we make it very easy through our work in the Israel-Britain Alliance for people to get involved in political campaigning and make your voice heard. And believe you me, it makes a huge difference, because when MPs get letters, or in particular now emails, in their inbox, and they get told by their staff, incidentally, we've had 10, we've had 15, we've had 20, we've had 30 emails on this subject, well, it makes them think twice about going against the issue that you raised with them. And one of the problems that the Labour Party has, in terms of the way it's structured, is that you will have a lot of MPs who, quite frankly, are anti-Semitic. And they're anti-Semitic through their hatred for Israel. It's visceral. Then you've got a group of MPs which Israel is a very important part of their lives, in terms of whether it be Jewish MPs, or indeed I was a Christian Zionist when I was in Parliament, and therefore it was important to me for different reasons which we haven't got time to get into just now. But the other part of it is there's a group of MPs who you would regard as moderate, who don't share our views about Israel, who don't share our views about the Jewish people, and therefore won't make a big deal about it.
Robin, Michael, thank you so much for being my guest on today's Politics Today. And I just want to thank you for watching this programme. What we discussed is so important, only for our nation's future, but also for our security. So let's continue to pray, let's stand with the Jewish people, and let's pray Jeremy Corbyn out of office.